All right, so Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa mutamassaka bi sunnatihi ila yawm al-din ma ba'd fa inna asdaqa al-hadith kitabullah wa khairul hadi hadi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa sharra al-umuri muhdathatuha wa kulla muhdathatin bid'atin wa kulla bid'atin dalala wa kulla dalalatin fi an-nar. I commence in the name of Allah, the most glorious, the most sublime. I send salutations of prayers and peace upon the finality of prophets and messengers, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and all who follow him in righteousness until the day of judgment. Indeed, the best speech is the book of Allah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, the Quran, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad, salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi. Beloved brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, we are continuing on looking at when Muslim marriage fails. And for us, this is an important topic, inshallah ta'ala, because what we're doing is looking at cases and analyzing those cases based on what has happened with those failed marriages, inshallah ta'ala, and trying to take steps to prevent our own marriages from failing currently, or the marriages that we are trying to embark upon or engage in the future from those marriages failing as well. And I'm going to read the entire case study today, inshallah ta'ala, because it's, mashallah, it was just a story I couldn't summarize, subhanAllah, especially if we're looking at her side of the story. And it was a story I couldn't summarize. And I think it befits us to listen to the entire story, her side of the story, inshallah ta'ala. And it's only a few pages, inshallah, so we should get through it within 10 minutes or 12 minutes or so, inshallah ta'ala. So she begins saying, the first time I met her, that's his story. She begins saying, no matter how prepared you might think you are, nothing can really ever fully prepare you for the true transition from single to married. It is quite a shock to have to go through that absolute road-changing ceremony. It is an even bigger shock to have to go through a divorce. While in preparing for the marriage, numerous friends and family support you and cheer you on. Dealing with the divorce part is very lonely. Denial, questions, and finger pointing are usually what you'll get from family and friends. Well, that's an interesting dilemma. Some will pretend to sympathize with your plight while bad-mouthing you behind your back, and others will cut you off completely for fear that you might be eyeing their husband as a potential prospect now as well. As for the community as a whole, the divorced woman seems to be just one more forgotten commodity to be lumped into the reject pile. I married my husband straight out of college. Ours was a beautiful love story. So many naive girls enter college with the hopes of achieving. We met at the mosque at one of those youth conventions that really function like a meat market, or really function more like a meat market. Marriage. For lots of FOB, fresh off the boat bachelors looking for a quick route to citizenship. We were there for fun and to gain Islamic knowledge, of course, but mainly for fun and for the social scene and interaction. Growing up as the youngest of three sisters, my parents were super strict with me and usually needed a full report of every step I took and every move I made. And if I didn't provide the report, they usually had enough community spies watching me to fill any gaps for them. Islamic events, conferences, and conventions were the only place they kind of loosened their reins a little. Looking back at it now, I wish they had continued their strictness even at that particular convention. We were both in our second year of college when we met that day. Dressed to the nines in my hijab and heels, I noticed him right away and seriously spent a good part of one particular session walking back and forth past his seat with my friends in an attempt to get his attention. My friends and I definitely knew our limits of interaction with the opposite gender, but this was as close to flirting as we have ever gotten. I constantly play that day back and often wish that I could have been smarter about things and just stayed in my seat rather than marketing myself in that way before what soon would become my future fiance. But the power of group thinking is pretty strong among girls. and a little part of me wanted to somehow experience a walk on the wild side, so as to speak. Well, the walking and the flaunting technique worked all too well, because as soon as the session was over, he came up to my group and immediately began talking to me. I felt incredibly flattered for being singled out, and I mistook this stroke to the ego for the Hollywood love at first sight concept that I only dreamed of experiencing. It turned out that we were both the same age. Okay, I was actually a few months older, but we never really discussed that. In the same year at colleges that were not, we were in the same year of college, and we were not too far away from each other and studying similar fields of science, even though I was going into teaching and he was going into engineering. I could almost hear the absolute click that my mind convinced me what was happening between us. By the end of the 3-day convention, I had met up with him several times between sessions, always with my friends, of course, and was convinced that this perfect specimen was going to be my future husband. We exchanged email addresses and parted ways at the end of the convention. I couldn't get him out of my mind. I couldn't get him off of my mind for the next few days. I kept waiting for an online message from him, but to no avail. At the time, my friends kept telling me to give him my cell phone number, but I promptly told them that that was completely un-Islamic and inappropriate. There's something about the anonymity of an email that makes the type of communication so much more halal in my eyes than speaking to a guy over the phone. It didn't hurt either way that my spying partners had no clue how to, that my spying parents, had no clue how to work the computer, let alone check my email, so my communications would be safe from them. On the other hand, they often went through my cell phone bills with a fine-tooth comb, even going as far as calling back the numbers they didn't recognize. While I was proud of myself that I hadn't given him my cell phone number, I was also anxious as to why I had not received an email yet. In the days that followed, I composed a pile of emails to him, all saved in my draft folder that I didn't have the courage to send out. I started acting like a lovesick teenager in front of my friends, who promptly advised me to Facebook him. That's when I had another moment. Facebook was even more anonymous than the casual email, and if I Facebooked him, I could appear a lot more cavalier online than if I attempted to send him an email. It was ingenious. I put my plan into motion and immediately found him on Facebook and sent him a quick poke. That way, I didn't have to agonize over what I would type, but the poke would be a friendly reminder of my existence, and if he was interested, he would surely poke back. Looking at his extensive friends list on Facebook, it should have given me the first clue to his player status. He had over 673 friends as opposed to my 149. Most of his friends consisted of girls who seemed like the unsavory type. Yet to my inexperienced eyes, all I could think of was how I'd love to be touched by his popularity. And so I was. My friend request was almost immediately confirmed, and my poke was quickly reciprocated along with an online Facebook gift of a funny looking troll, and I was completely elated. And so our relationship began. At first, our email exchanges and Facebook posts were very generic and innocent enough. We posted inane comments about the weather, our classes, and droll observations. Occasionally, I'd receive an IM, instant message, or chat request while online, and I'd jump at the opportunity to actually talk to him in real time. For some reason, though, I always felt a little guilty with the instant messaging and would look fervently over my shoulder to make sure my parents were not watching or did not come into my room and catch me in the act. Soon enough, the instant messaging evolved into "when can I see you" questions. Even though I talked to guys frequently in college, I never scheduled the time and place to meet with a guy or to hang out with one. It was kind of like the difference between phone calls and emails. I could rationalize the accidental meeting that might turn into eating lunch with a group of guys and girls together in the student center, yet I felt like it was a huge Islamic transgression to take things a step further and actually intend to meet a guy for lunch without the presence of friends. Before I knew it, though, I was breaking my own rules, and definitely those of my parents, by agreeing to meet up with him. Since I had a nagging feeling of doing something that wasn't completely right, I insisted that we meet in a quiet off-campus lunch place so that no one would be able to see us. The first few scheduled meetings consisted of me nervously looking around, answering his questions with monosyllabic responses. He seemed amused by my fears and constantly made fun of me. As I continued to email him, it became easier and easier for me to open the door to more interactions in person. Soon enough, we'd exchange phone numbers and were in constant texting, IMing mode, or emailing mode. What had seemed so wrong a few months ago now seemed absolutely natural and not so bad after all. I didn't realize at the time that this is often how haram, unlawful, prohibited actions are justified. You give an inch of your integrity and suddenly you realize that you've actually lost a mile. You give an inch of your integrity and you realize that actually you've lost a mile. Pretty much my entire second year of college was spent in this pseudo dating situation that I had convinced myself was okay. Marriage was a topic we had touched upon, but hadn't really tackled in concrete terms. Our illicit marriage meetings, our illicit meetings were bound to be found out sooner or later. Unfortunately, it was definitely sooner in our case. The summer of that sophomore year, I began to devise elaborate stories for my parents of how I had to meet this friend or that friend after work or to help with this or that. Of course, they suspected something wasn't right since I'd actually lost touch with most of my closest friends because of my obsessive and constant communication with him and him alone. It was in a ritzy cafe that we were finally caught that summer. As we laughingly wiped the foamy whipped cream from our iced coffee drinks off of our face, we looked up just in time to see my uncle staring at us from across the barista's counter. I got up and ran out the cafe in embarrassment. My parents, of course, assumed the worst and wanted to find out immediately who this boy was and how far I actually had gone with him. Their disappointment was harder to bear than their anger at my dishonesty. That same night, my father went to his house and demanded to speak to him. The details of that conversation are something no one has ever shared with me, but I can imagine some of the things my formidable father may have said. The next day, I came home from my part-time summer job at the bookstore to a full house with aunts, uncles, and cousins all hugging me and congratulating me upon my upcoming engagement. I couldn't look up to meet my parents' disapproving gaze as I knew they had somehow saved me from the ultimate loss of face or shameful embarrassment of my family. I should have been happy at this point. Wasn't marriage to this boy what I really wanted? I wasn't quite sure anymore since my parents seemed less than thrilled with the idea. We were officially engaged at the start of our junior year, but only with Qira'atul Fatiha, the recitement of Surah Al-Fatiha, a parental agreement of marriage, which meant I was spoken for in the eyes of the community, but could not really be with my fiance without a mahram, a guardian who is unmarriageable to me. It seemed to me to be an awkward step backwards, since I had already gotten to know him before we'd come to any formal marriage agreement. And now that we were to be married, I couldn't be with him without a chaperone. My goal now was to simply get back to the good graces of my parents. So I tried my hardest to avoid the temptations to meet with him alone again, as we used to do. Our relationship seemed to mellow out a little as we lost that initial glow of novelty and secrecy. The weekends began to follow the monotonous routine of having him come over with his family, who I had the distinct feeling did not like me very much, as we sat stiffly at the dining room table trying to carry on a conversation closely supervised by all of the adults around us. I realized that we were both terrified of our parents, he more so than I even. And at that point, we were walking on eggshells and trying to avoid any major upheavals that might upset the carefully balanced equilibrium of peace. He decided to forego his engineering degree, which would have taken him another 2 years, and instead accelerated his course schedule so that he could graduate with a general science degree at the end of his 3rd year rather than his 5th. Upon graduation, he was already guaranteed a job at a company that his uncle was practically a CEO of, and that he'd been interning at for the past several months. This meant that our marriage didn't need to be delayed past the summer. I also decided to delay the teaching certification program I had intended to continue with and opted instead to double up on courses and graduate just 1 semester after our marriage. Once we had made our marriage graduation plans known to both of our families, it seemed like we were finally gaining their approval and we're almost done. A few months before our scheduled wedding, they agreed to do Ketz Kitab, literally meaning the writing of the book. which was essentially the legal and Islamic marriage without consummation, in order to allow us to go out together without a mahram or chaperone and search for wedding venues and an apartment and the likes. I think those first few months of being alone together in this married but not yet fully married state were both the most exhilarating and the most confusing days. While we could be together, hold hands, and do all the romantic things I dream of, we had to know where to draw the line. Miraculously, we were able to navigate through this time, but not without a few near misses. Our wedding was an interesting affair with the usual arguments about guests, lists, food, and entertainment between the families. We had regained our comfort level and friendship with each other and were giddy with anticipation about our honeymoon more than anything else. We let the parents duke it out regarding everything from which china plates we should register for to what color the wedding napkins should be, as we focused on choosing the island vacation our parents were going to pay for as a wedding gift, along with the splitting the cost of the actual wedding and some of our furniture. We had bigger and better things to think about and were luckily able to seal ourselves off to a certain extent from these constant spats. The first few months of our marriage truly felt like an extended honeymoon. I was convinced that we were made for each other and could easily disregard the little annoying habits I discovered my husband had. Things like never capping the toothpaste tube or forgetting to put away his dinner plate every evening were slight annoyances that I didn't mind overlooking. After the first few months, though, the novelty of constantly eating out, going to the movies whenever we wanted to, munching chips in the bed, and a million other little luxuries we never experienced with our parents began to wear off. Soon enough, the little annoyances such as dirty socks taken off and left in the kitchen floor, belching out loud after every meal, began to seriously get on my nerves. His parents stopping by unannounced all of the time, and his younger sister calling every other day to give me a piece of her mind really began to wear my patience down. He seemed completely oblivious to these things and constantly attributed my complaints to my own imagination. Even though I'd always hated my mom's nagging, I found myself following the same pattern. Every time he'd throw himself in the front of the TV, I'd give him a long list of things that needed to be done around the apartment, or I tried to start up an argument that we hadn't resolved from the previous week just to get him to focus on me. He started going out more and more frequently with his friends after work and coming home long after dinner had turned cold, and I cried myself to sleep from anger and loneliness. It was after we'd been married for almost about 7 months that I began to notice the amount of time he was spending in front of the computer. He'd come home late from work, tiptoe into the bedroom to ensure that I was asleep, and then run downstairs and sit in front of his laptop for hours throughout the night. Of course, I was never fully asleep during those times, but was too cowardly to get up and confront him. The intimate moments of our early marriage had completely gone, and I was shocked at what an empty shell our union had become. After a few weeks of this odd computer obsession, I decided to confront him and find out what was going on. He flew into a rage and insisted that he was working late hours and coming home to complete unfinished work just to make ends meet. I immediately felt rotten for thinking the worst of my husband and apologized profusely. A few more weeks passed and his behavior with the computer continued. I contemplated on turning on his computer to check his history of his websites, but I didn't want to be that kind of spying wife. Or maybe I was just afraid of confirming what I already knew was pretty sure of. When I finally got the courage to actually check his computer, I was surprised to see that the history was completely wiped clean and that nothing really incriminating existed on his computer other than work-related spreadsheets and emails. I cooked him a great meal that night and dressed up in one of my more alluring outfits with the intention of reigniting the spark in our marriage again. He didn't come home that night until way past midnight. His excuse again was that he was working late. Since the company he worked for dealt with researching and creating the material needed to make solar panels, I couldn't really buy into the whole working late concept. We both went to bed really angry and woke up with the same rift growing between us. I knew something was wrong, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. I decided that I had too much time on my hands and that I would go back to my part-time job at the bookstore just to get out of the house. Even if I wasn't necessarily working with my degree, it was better than staying home and thinking the worst of my husband. He loved the idea of going back to work, and I thought this might be a step in the right direction. Oddly enough, he started suddenly working from home several days out of the week while I was at the bookstore. Again, I had the same unsettling feeling that something was up. As I grew further and further apart from my husband, I began to reconnect with some of my college friends. I thought that maybe if I verbalized my fears, I'd see how silly I was being and I could get some affirmation that my marriage really wasn't falling apart. I called an old friend and she agreed to meet me for coffee at the ritzy cafe that had started the whole chain of events in my marriage and were coming to an end. It's funny how the power of irony tends to strike when you least expect it. Walking into that cafe, I had the strangest feeling of deja vu. I stood at the barista counter and looked over at the seat where I had sat with my husband a few short years ago, practically expecting to see a younger version of me and him sitting there half in love, wiping the foam of the coffee off of our faces. I'm sure you can imagine the double take I did when I saw my husband actually sitting there, literally wiping foam off his face and laughing with another woman. She looked like she was still a college student herself and maybe a younger, prettier version of me when I had sat there with him in that same spot. For the second time in my life, I ran out of the cafe without looking back. And for the first time in my life, I waited past midnight for my husband to come home so that I can confront him. I'm not going to tell you that I erupted into anger and our marriage dissolved on the spot after my confrontation. He had a million excuses as to why he was with that woman. Although his stories didn't fit in all the right places, I was eager to lap it up rather than feel the hurt of rejection and betrayal. Even though deep down I knew that I didn't really believe him, I accepted his story anyway because the alternative seemed so bleak. I lived through another year of his unrelenting lies and obvious cheating. He began to grow confident and stupidly comfortable in my unwavering loyalty. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone about what our marriage was going through because I felt like the ultimate failure. SubhanAllah. I kept thinking that I was not pretty enough or smart enough to keep my own husband faithful to me. I was confident that he had enough restraint and Islamic upbringing that he would not commit absolute adultery. But I wondered just how far he would go before drawing the line. I knew that he was Facebooking, emailing, and texting more than one woman and playing the field like an unfettered single man. Our intimacy had depleted to utter nothingness. So even my hopes of conceiving a child seemed like another empty dead end until my husband deemed me worthy to receive his attention once again. Numerous arguments and ultimatums brought about nothing but more arguments and tears. He didn't deny associating with other women. He simply attributed my fears to unfounded paranoia. I was getting to the point where I began to question my own sanity. That was when I packed my bags and left him. I had an education, I had a family, I had self-dignity. I was not going to stand around and wait for him to leave me or to walk all over me for the sake of his new girlfriends. I can't say I'm a whole lot happier as a divorced woman, but I do believe that I did the right thing. It's hard to explain our divorce to the people of my community since I am too embarrassed to admit that I wasn't good enough in the eyes of my husband. Somehow he seems to be getting all the community support by acting like he can't understand why I would leave him after he gave up everything for our great love. What a mockery he made of the sanctity of our Islamic marriage. I've decided to go back to school and try to pick up the pieces where I left off. My parents still wonder what happened in my marriage, but surprisingly support my decision. I think they always knew that he was not the right one for me, but they only wanted to do the right thing. Every night I pray to Allah to forgive me for my transgressions. Sometimes late at night, I'll receive a little ding on my computer, and I know that it's him trying to IM me. I'm not going down that path again. If nothing else, I've learned that one little misstep can lead to many more big ones. I don't know if I will ever marry again since I'm considered used and damaged goods. Either way, I think I have quite a bit of growing up to do. In the meantime, I still have faith in Allah and that things will turn out okay someday. Subhanallah. So this is, subhanallah, the case, inshallah ta'ala, of her side of the story. And of course, we will be listening to his side of the story next week. But to kind of analyze a little bit her side of the story, inshallah ta'ala, she begins by talking about the issue of marriage and divorce and how divorce can be lonely. And when we look at that statement that divorce can be lonely, the reality is that divorce shouldn't be lonely, right? This should still be a time where we are finding support from our families and our friends, inshallah ta'ala. That just because a person divorces from their husband or wife, it doesn't now mean that we throw them into this corner and you're alone. Oh my God, how could you? What is wrong with you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed divorce, as we've mentioned within the marriage courses. Keep them in kindness or release them in kindness, inshallah ta'ala, right? And we should emotionally be supporting our family, our friends, our brothers, our sisters who are going through that difficult moment in their life. These are moments that break people sometimes, break their spirits, break their faith, right? Emotionally break them into pieces. These are moments where they should not be left alone, inshallah ta'ala. We also have here, subhanAllah, that she began talking about how she met her husband at a convention that she called the meat market. Islam, the marriage market, right? Where we see, and we've seen it, brothers and sisters, right? You've been to an ethnic convention, mashallah. You've been to a mass convention, right? Mashallah. And you see the single people out there flaunting and flirting. You know what I mean? It's clear, subhanAllah, right? That the flaunting and flirting is going on and that people are, subhanAllah, looking, inshallah ta'ala, for that other spouse, inshallah ta'ala, or looking for a spouse, inshallah ta'ala. But we need to take into consideration that we need to be aware of how we are presenting ourselves, right? As she said, she kept kind of walking back and forth past the young man so that he can notice her while she was with her friends. And she said she did this more so because of that girl peer pressure, right? She said women peer pressure, girl peer pressure is harder than what men may do, subhanallah rabbil azim, right? And that girl peer pressure made her do that, inshallah ta'ala. And what happens is that when you present yourself in a certain way, in many instances, what's going to happen is that you're going to get that type of person, right? You present yourself flirting, you present yourself open, right? And then soon after, as she says, they began to meet up because he immediately after the lecture came over and talked to her, right? He didn't come over and ask her, where is your wali? Do you have a wali? Is your father Muslim? Can I get your father's phone number? I'm interested in you possibly, if you're interested, inshallah ta'ala, right? That's the right step, right? To say, I'm interested in you, can I get the contact? Because I want to take the right steps. Remember that whatever starts off on the bad foot may end on a bad foot, right? Subhanallah. Because you're going to end up taking steps that necessarily are not going to be Islamic and may drive you down the wrong road. And I got tons of stories that I won't be able to tell you tonight just from people walking down the wrong road, right? And then she mentioned how her parents used to keep a tight rope on her, except like at the conventions, right? And we have to realize, inshallah ta'ala, that our parents, our brothers, our sisters, who mashallah advise us not to walk down certain paths, because this isn't just parents with children, but sometimes it's adults, right? With their brothers and sisters, telling them, listen, sister, don't take that road. Don't talk to that brother like that, right? Sister, watch it how you interact. Brother, watch what you're doing, inshallah ta'ala. That's not appropriate, right? These are advices coming with love because they want the best for you, inshallah ta'ala, right? And that rope that they have is tight, right? In many instances, with your parents especially, because they have experience that you don't have. They've lived many, many years of life that you haven't. Especially if they weren't Muslim, they lived many, many years of life duping and deceiving and trying to do the same thing that many other people are trying to do, inshallah ta'ala. And many of these old tricks just kind of come around just like, right, coach, just like dress and fashion, right? It kind of swaps all the way around, inshallah ta'ala. If you're able to think about, what you wore 20 years ago and bring it back in now, 20 years later, you'll make a killing and you'll be rich, right? Because they just kind of go around and around and around, right? And there's never anything inventive, anything new, inshallah ta'ala. The same thing with those experiences with children. Your parents have been through that, inshallah ta'ala, and they know. So has your brothers and your sisters, inshallah ta'ala. Also, she talked about how when she first met him that, she had that Hollywood moment, love at first sight, like, wow, this is him, this is the one, right? Or this is her, she's the one, right? Subhanallah, we have to, brothers and sisters, wallahi, tallahi, wa billahi, stop living in Hollywood, okay? Life is not Hollywood. That stuff that people sit down and they write in those books, inshallah ta'ala, so that they can sell and make millions of dollars, and those movies that they make, inshallah ta'ala, that in many instances is not real life. Yes, can it happen? Absolutely. You know what I mean? But for the most case, that is someone's imagination putting things to paper and then making and creating a movie, inshallah, that in many instances don't happen that way in real life, right? Life is very different than what you see on the movie, subhanahu rabbil azim, right? And then she talked about how after the 3-day convention, they met up several times. This is a problem, right? Because right away, not only did she flirt, right, to get his attention, not only did he walk over and get her attention and confront her, right? And they began talking, but now they met over several days without a wali present, right? Without the guardian present, without the representative present. And this doesn't only have to be parents with their children, but this can be adult men and women as well, okay? You should not be meeting up with the brothers and sisters in private without your guardian present, inshallah ta'ala. That is completely haram. And all of that of, well, we used to meet up with our friends, of course, right? This is that new mindset. We meet up with our friends. We got the brothers and we got the sisters. Part of us are single, the other part may be married and just not keeping the bounds the way we're supposed to, inshallah ta'ala, that everybody comes together. So now this is a safe space that I can kick it with this man, inshallah ta'ala, kick it with this brother and talk with him, inshallah ta'ala, openly, because we're in a group setting. It doesn't make it right. There's still a need for the wali, right? There's still a need for the guardian, inshallah ta'ala, to assure that things are being done properly. And again, what you begin to do is what happens with her, inshallah ta'ala, is that they begin to now take it to the next level. She says after that, she's waiting for the email and she's not getting it. She said, I didn't give him my phone number because I thought that would be a little too much, subhanAllah, right? So the whole issue of khalwa, and we're going to see they address this at the end, inshallah ta'ala, of seclusion. They tried to say, well, talking by email and talking by text is not seclusion, right? Because we're not alone in a room together. So you see how shaytan begins to take the mind and begins to justify actions for our brothers and sisters of, well, it should be okay for us to talk, right? Without nobody being present, because we're over the computer, we're over the email, we're over a text, we're through Facebook Messenger, inshallah, and we're not alone. But the reality is that you are alone, aren't you? Right? Who's supervising the texts back and forth? Who's monitoring, right, the speech and the words that are being said? Except that shaitan begins to poke and shaitan begins to prick and shaitan begins to, to recommend and whisper. And you may begin sending messages back and forth that may not be appropriate, right? Some people go as far as sending pictures that become inappropriate, inshallah ta'ala. And then you begin talking and talking more, inshallah ta'ala. And as she says, that this in her eyes was Islamically halal, right? Subhana Rabbil Azim. But we know that this is another step that can take us down that wrong path, inshallah ta'ala. And then she says, I started acting like a lovesick teenager when he wouldn't, send me an email back, and I decided to poke him on Facebook. He poked it back, and this engaged everything, subhanAllah, okay? Engaged everything. And then she went on his Facebook, and she saw that he had 673 friends consisting of mostly women who were unsavory, right? Signs, red flags, signs, more red flags, signs, more red flags, as to what this young man probably was involved in, as to what this brother may be involved in, inshallah ta'ala. But because we live in a Hollywood type of mindset, right, subhanAllah, she already had in her mind that she was in it, right? Subhanallah, she ignored all of this, inshallah ta'ala, which were red flags and signs. And then she says, I felt like it was a huge Islamic transgression to step things up further and go out for lunch, because as they began to talk and began to engage, it was like, well, we can get together, inshallah ta'ala, why don't we meet up? We can go out for coffee, we do something in a public space, inshallah ta'ala. It's not like we're going to be alone, right? We're going to be around other people, right? Shaitan justifying, right, the ends again, subhanallah. And then she says, before I knew it, I was breaking my own rules, right? Again, where is the intentions, right? Where is the intentions in doing things correctly, inshallah ta'ala. And if we know that eventually when we break our own rules, that what happens is far worse, right? Subhanallah. And you can tell the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us in a beautiful hadith that when the heart begins to feel uneasy, your mind begins to feel uneasy, right? She said she's sitting in this place and she begins to do like this, right? The whole time she's door opens, she's looking back. Is it going to be somebody I know? Is it going to be my parents? You know what I mean? All of that proves to you inside you're not doing something right, right? You're not doing something right, brothers and sisters, right? Same thing, right, with our brothers and sisters who are not, children or, to parents, children to anyone. And he says, but I didn't realize at this time that this is often how haram actions are justified, right? Subhanallah. And if you give an inch of your integrity, so beautiful. You give an inch of your integrity, suddenly you realize that you have actually lost a mile. Allahu Akbar, right? And this is the issue. We find sisters and brothers that this happens with them. And then inshallah ta'ala, next thing you know, they are pregnant. They have committed adultery. They have committed, they've had sex outside of the fold, the marriage, fornication, right? They did all of these things that now is hard to take back, right? Subhanallah. And I can tell you of 1,001 stories as well, right? Brothers and sisters meet up, you know what I mean? They together, meet up at some get together. All of a sudden they slip away so that they can have a conversation. The next you know, they are alone together. The next you know, the kiss comes. The next you know, the fornication comes. The next you know, pregnancy comes. The next you know, Imam, how can I fix this? It's too late. Imam, can we get married? Imam, and subhana rabbil azim, right? We need to do things right from the very beginning, inshallah ta'ala. And then she says, this is eventually how she got caught being in that ritzy cafe, and her and the boy end up getting caught being seen by her uncle, inshallah ta'ala, and showing that the consequences, right? Now, what happens after this? The consequences were that the father, who's now extremely upset at who's this boy, right? Who's this man? Who's this brother, right? We can look at all of the different levels of this thing, right? And now they go over to the house and probably demanded, you need to marry my daughter, right? You've been seeing her for how long? You've been out with her in private for doing I don't know what, and pushing his parents, and his parents are probably like, what? Everybody's now feeling the burden of the family shame and the burden of, subhanallah, how the people going to look at us. And a marriage is forced, inshallah ta'ala. And the next day she says she goes to work, subhanallah. And then all of a sudden her family is coming over, hugging her, saying, congratulations, marhaba, jazakillah khair, mabluk. Right? Subhanallah. You're getting married. Allahu Akbar. She didn't even know. You know what I mean? The father moved on to marry her, to get her in the mode of marriage, because she and he were already taking the wrong steps. Subhanallah. Okay. Then she says they got engaged. They did the qira'at al-Fatiha, right? Which meant they still weren't married. And now they had to pull back, right? And now it was difficult because they were so far ahead, right? Doing the things the wrong way, that now they had to try to pull back to do the things the right way, which made things even more difficult, subhanAllah. And as she stated, their relationship mellowed out a little bit, and they lost a little bit of that oomph that they had built up during novelty and secrecy, right? Subhanallah. And then the other consequence of all of this was that they both cut their degrees short so that they can expedite the marriage, so that they can have the feeling that they were looking for, right? That they were having while they were not doing the things the lawful way, right? So he figured, I'm going to cut my 5-year degree down to a 3-year degree. She's like, I'm going to go ahead and cut down some courses, not take some certifications, inshallah ta'ala, so that I can get married. I can be married a month right after, inshallah ta'ala, and be done with this, subhanallah. And at the end of the day, that's a consequence as well, because we see when we fast forward to her divorce afterwards, now, 2 years later, 3 years later, she has to return back now to try to go get her certifications and her education and do whatever it is that needs to be done so that she can begin to live her life as a divorcee, right? Subhanallah, because they didn't want to wait, right? As if waiting was going to be such a difficult time. It's going to be so hard. Why are we going to wait? We need to push things forward. And way too often, married people or people looking to get married do this, right? We need to rush. We need to get this done now, inshallah ta'ala. Why wait a month, 5 months, a year, 2 years? Plan it out. What is the rush if you're trying to be together for the rest of your life, right? The rush to what? To live together, to have moments of intimacy, to kiss one another, to hug one another, to be in a relationship, have relations, right? All of that can wait, inshallah ta'ala. Make sure that you're setting your life and your priorities and your goals so that when finally you move in together, inshallah ta'ala, you can have the best life, right? You can have the best life. Don't ruin that best life moment, inshallah ta'ala, because you want to have moments that you think are going to make your life the best right now. And I can tell you, as she said, that after they got married, the first few months were a honeymoon, right? Subhanallah. And that's how it always is. The first few months are the honeymoon. And then reality hits, right? Reality strikes. And the reality came, subhanallah, and she started saying, I began to become annoyed. He wouldn't cover his own toothpaste. You know what I mean? He had little annoying habits. He would belch after every meal. You know what I mean? Dude will fart, whatever it may be, right? Subhanallah Rabbil Azim, right? Everybody has something, subhanallah. And until you don't feel comfortable enough around that person, these things don't come out, right? And there may be things that we don't like, right? Subhanallah. But again, this is part of marriage, right? This is the reality. This is what Hollywood and Bollywood aren't showing, right? This is a very real concept that now your love, right, that you had in the beginning, that subhanallah, infatuation that you had, is it going to survive the times of true marriage, right? Where now your wife may get pregnant. Afterwards, she used to be skinny. Now she's going to be chunky probably after that. If she's not the type of woman to be working out, right? Because she had a baby, right? Her body is going to change. Your husband, who knows what's going to happen? He becomes an Al Bundy on the couch, right? All of these things are reality, subhanAllah, right? And if we don't go back to the second course, the whole issue of love languages and trying to learn each other's love languages, trying to learn how to communicate, trying to learn how to talk with one another, right? We'll end up in this failed marriage sequence all of the time, because marriage has to surpass, right, time. Marriage has to surpass time and last long, inshallah ta'ala, throughout all of these difficult things that you're going to face within your marriage, inshallah ta'ala, that you didn't know until you actually moved in, right? Subhanallah. And then she talked back, just rewinding a little bit, she talked about when they had the Ketub Kitab. When they had the Ketub Kitab, which now gave them the ability, subhanallah, to be able to be alone, right? Without the chaperone, which they did the Islamic marriage contract, but with the understanding there's no consummation. You're not going to be kissing. You're not going to be having sex. None of that is going to take place. You're going to utilize that time to get to know one another more, right? Because now you get to spend more time together. And you want to be wise. You want to use that time to get to know each other. You don't want to give yourself to one another, and then at the end of getting to know one another, you say, really, I don't like this person and I don't want to be married to them, right? Because it's happened, right? SubhanAllah. So you want to hold back. And she stated that this was some of the most difficult moments, right? She said they had a near few misses, right? SubhanAllah, right? And this is difficult because it requires constraint, right? It requires constraint from both of you, inshallah ta'ala, when you're alone. But that constraint is necessary because it gives you a chance to better know whether this is the right step for you or not, right? Remember that the first moments, inshallah ta'ala, are going to be those key moments for you, inshallah ta'ala, okay? The first moments are going to be those key moments for you. Now, you don't want to give up those first moments when you're alone, and then now all of a sudden you decide at the end, I had a brother. I know this brother and his sister, they were together. They had Kitab. They got to know each other for about 8-9 months. After the 8-9 months, they didn't consummate. Alhamdulillah, the brother looked at the sister and said, really, I don't think you're the one for me. He went to her father, said, listen, I'm sorry. I don't think your daughter is the one for me. I apologize, but I want to back out of this marriage, inshallah ta'ala. They voided the contract. She went her way, he went his way. She's still left with her virginity. He's still left with his dignity, right? They were both able to move on, inshallah ta'ala, especially, alhamdulillah, in front of Allah, saying, khalas, we let each other go without having to go ahead and get involved in things, even though we had a contract, right? For the sake of Allah, and we were able to move on, inshallah ta'ala, and search for somebody who was going to be better for us, right? So this kitab is important, that in that moment, inshallah ta'ala, when you have that khalwa, when you are alone, right, that there's constraint, serious constraints, right? Because you don't want to make that mistake, inshallah ta'ala, that you end up being that one who goes too far because no one now is with you and no one can see you, right? Or you go and you trick yourself and say, well, shaytan, yeah, we're married, legitimately, we're married. We can just go ahead and do this. It doesn't make a difference. What are we going to wait for, right? And go against the parents' wishes, right? Or against the wali's wishes. And then next thing you know, you're not happy because what you find out is that this man or this woman was not the person for you, inshallah ta'ala. Remember that she said he seems to completely oblivious to things and constantly attribute my complaints to his own imagination, right? Remember in the last class, complaints are part of communicating your love language, right? They're not that you should be complaining or do it on purpose, but that when your spouse complains to you over and over again about the same thing, that spouse is trying to inform you of how to love them, right? They're trying to inform you of how to love them. Don't take those complaints and throw them to the side. You complain too much. You're always talking about the same thing, subhanallah, right? Look at the complaints and say, subhanallah, maybe I need to change myself. Maybe I need to do something different, inshallah ta'ala. Stop looking at the complaints. And even sometimes, what I get often with married couples that hear these lectures, inshallah ta'ala, is that they go back home and they say to each other, look, you heard what the Imam said, right? You need to check yourself. No, don't do that. Don't do that, right? Use these lectures and this guidance to check you. Don't check your spouse. Check you. Check yourself. Take this information and say, what am I doing? Am I adhering to it? Am I implementing it? Is that my fault? Is that something that I do? Is that something I don't do? That's something I need to do more of? Because when you begin to listen, right, with the ears of, I'm going to correct my spouse and not correct yourself, that is already a mistake. Right? That is already a mistake. Why? Because you're seeing yourself as free and innocent and not guilty of doing anything. And a good friend of mine used to tell me, look, when you point like this, you see these other three? He said they point back at you. You got one pointed at me and you got three pointed at you. So check yourself, brother, right? Subhanallah, right? So be careful of taking this type of information to utilize this information to try to give yourself an upper hand in your relationship. Utilize this information to give yourself an upper hand by changing you and not by using it to try to defeat your spouse or now prove that your spouse is deficient in areas that you believe they need to be changed, inshallah ta'ala, okay? She talked about how intimacy was gone, right? And we need to, in marriages as well, realize that after they got married, she says one of the first things that went was intimacy. And this is a red flag. In many instances, this begins to be a red flag, right? Intimacy is a big part of marriage, right? It's just the truth. This is where the love comes from. This is how mashallah, you continue to show each other love outside of those other things, right? Subhanallah, right? And more times than not, if intimacy stops in the home, the person begins to look for it somewhere else. Let's be real. The person begins to look for it somewhere else, right? Or the person has already commenced looking for it somewhere else, and this is why it began to stop. And this is what she was hinting to, that perhaps he had already been on his way when he was running down to the computer, right? Already probably cheating, inshallah ta'ala. And we have to know, brothers and sisters, this is very important because I get it in marriages as well. Marriage is an open book. And I'm so sorry that I've gone a long time. I'll extend the class a little bit for your comments and questions, inshallah. Marriage is an open book, right? There is no hiding your passwords. There's no hiding your email address. There's no making secret Facebook accounts. There's no making hidden Instagram account. When you begin to erase your history on your computer, those are red flags, right? Those are red flags. Don't try to tell your spouse, well, I do that because you need to learn to trust me. Don't play that game, right? I do that so you need to learn how to trust me. Don't play that game, right? That's a game of failure, right? Don't play that game. Don't delve into the emotions of your spouse that way. You know that's going to hurt. You know that they're not going to be able to hold back. Most humans can't, right? Because shaytan pushes, the whisper comes in, the doubts insert into the mind. Don't do that. Marriage should be an open book. My wife, she has all of my passwords. She knows how to get into my phone. She knows how to get into my emails. She knows how to get into my Facebook. I couldn't care less, right? Because I'm not hiding anything, right? She can see whatever she wants, whenever she wants, inshallah ta'ala. I'm not hiding anything. There's nothing to hide, right? The minute I begin to, all of that is problematic, okay? And proves that something is wrong, inshallah ta'ala. And eventually the truth comes out. She caught the brother at the cafe with another woman. She wasn't smart enough to approach the brother in that situation, which she should have been, right? She waited till she ran out, and maybe because of her emotions and everything else, I can't blame the sister. She runs out, instead of approaching the brother, he comes back and says, well, maybe this is a person from work. We're going to see a side of the story next week. This is a person for work, or this was this, or that was that. You know what I mean? It doesn't make it right. Right? If you work in a field when you have to be alone with the opposite gender, or in a situation that's going to place you alone with the opposite gender, you make sure you inform your spouse. Why? Because if they run into you in that situation, there's going to be a problem, right? And you should try your best to avoid that situation by any means necessary. Don't ever place yourself in a situation where you're going to be alone with a co-worker or anybody else in a room by yourself when nobody's around, out in the car. Never, ever, anywhere. Because shaitan will always whisper that doubt, and there's going to be problems. Alhamdulillah, she ran out. Alhamdulillah, she didn't grab a knife. And alhamdulillah, she didn't grab a bottle off the table and run to the table and begin going at the girl or going at the brother, right? Because psychoticness sometimes come out of people in those times, right? Rage and insanity hits the person in that state, of anger, when they see that they've been cheated on, or they may be cheated on. And subhanAllah, people are known to do some crazy things in those moments, right? And you can't just say, as he was saying, oh, you just don't trust enough. It's just, what was the words he used here? He was chalking it off to her, I forgot the words he used. Her paranoia. You're just paranoid, subhanAllah. You're just being paranoid. What do you mean I'm being paranoid, right? I'm being paranoid. You're talking to a person from the opposite gender. Like, come on, hawla wala quwwata illa billah. La. There needs to be clarity. Subhanallah. I tried even as an Imam, if a sister calls and it's on my phone and I'm talking to a sister, I inform my wife, sister so-and-so is on the phone. Have to deal with the issue of so-and-so, inshallah ta'ala. Why? Because I need to remove shaitan. Even sometimes the sister be like, oh, can I get salam to your wife? Here you go, inshallah ta'ala, right? If that's a work thing or whatever it may be, inshallah ta'ala, make sure that your spouse is comfortable, inshallah ta'ala, and knows that there is nothing beyond the work that's being done right now, inshallah, right? Because you don't want to bring shaitan into your household, inshallah ta'ala, okay? Subhanallah. Also, she mentioned at the end, inshallah ta'ala, just checking, make sure I didn't forget anything. Oh, she mentioned that she felt like she wasn't pretty enough, to keep her husband. She wasn't smart enough. This low self-esteem due to the lack of attention that her husband was giving her. Sisters, don't do this to yourself. Don't do this to yourself, inshallah ta'ala, because he's an idiot, because he's a fool, because he's a buffoon, right? Don't think that the problem is you. The problem is him, right? The problem is him, inshallah. Don't let your self-esteem take a hit because this brother, he's not living right, inshallah ta'ala, okay? And then she says she lived through another year of this, right? Meaning when the things hit don't let things fester. In marriage, you can't let things fester. If you let them fester, things will come back and bite you on the behind. You have to deal with them right then and there, inshallah ta'ala. Maybe not right then and there. Sometimes you have to give a little bit of time, an hour, 2 hours. Let us cool down. We'll talk about it. Go to therapy, right? Inshallah ta'ala. But don't let them fester. Why? Because those things that stay in the heart don't go away, right? Those things that stay in the mind stay present. And they will come up over and over and over again every time you have an argument, every time you have a debate, every time you feel a certain way, right? And the only way to solve those things is by dealing with those issues, inshallah ta'ala. And then, he went on and didn't deny being with other women and girls, right? Which means he lost respect completely for his wife, right? He lost respect completely for his wife. And sometimes this happens with women and they lose respect completely for their husband, subhanAllah, right? And this can never, ever happen in a relationship, inshallah ta'ala. Once that respect is gone, khalas, the marriage is out the door. Okay. And then she says, again, it's hard to explain our divorce to the community, and the community took his side rather than mine. In this part, she was protecting the brother's honor. You know what I mean? She didn't put his business out there, protected his honor. And the people, because they didn't get both sides of the stories as they should, automatically took the brother's side and began looking at her cross-eyed and twisted, And in this case, subhanAllah, the sisters or the brothers, they can take the high road, right? Which is, mashallah, let Allah deal with it, or expose it in the community. This guy is a dirtbag, subhanAllah. He cheats on his wives. He goes out with other women, right? So perhaps, he doesn't do the same to someone else, right? Subhanallah Rabbil Azim. Whatever you choose, that's up to you, inshallah ta'ala. And don't come at me and say, Imam, listen, I believe that sometimes the truth needs to come out about certain people because they remain being in that cycle of just damaging people, inshallah ta'ala, right? And that's not healthy, right? Subhanallah. Ending, inshallah ta'ala. She says she doesn't know if she will ever marry again, right? Because she's damaged goods. Sisters, you are not damaged goods after getting married. If you look at the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in the history of Islam, you will see that during the time of the Prophet, the women would get divorced and other men would come and marry them with no issues, right? All of these cultural garbage of when a woman gets divorced, she's no longer good. That's cultural garbage. It's nonsense, right? SubhanAllah. Being a divorcee doesn't mean that you're no good. All of a sudden, the brother is okay to remarry, but the sister is not. Kaif. What is this, right? Not. The woman still, mashallah, remains to be a believer. Mashallah, remains to be a person of Allah, remains to be someone with dignity and honor, right? SubhanAllah, should be treated as such. SubhanAllah, just because they've been with someone else, if you choose to have someone like that or don't choose, that's your business. That's your prerogative, right? But don't make it seem as if they're damaged goods. And sisters, you are not damaged goods, inshallah ta'ala. And then she states, I still have faith in Allah that things will turn out okay one day. And alhamdulillah, we're happy that she still has faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Iman is key for everything and will help us get through everything in this life and whatever difficulties we have, inshallah ta'ala. With that, brothers and sisters, I'll allow you guys to unmute yourselves, those of you who are here in the room, or to go ahead and, share whatever you are feeling, inshallah ta'ala, regarding today's session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask the questions. Again, you can unmute yourself when you ask the question, or inshallah ta'ala, you can send it via the chat as well. Same thing for those of you who are on Facebook with us, inshallah. Again, I apologize for going over time, but subhanallah, it is something that, in analyzing this case, there was so much there, and subhanallah, that, I feel very passionate about. And I'm pretty sure we could have had a maybe much longer session regarding it, subhanallah. One of our sisters online, she says, yes, open communication is key to a successful marriage. Hard conversations bring clarity. And that's the truth. Hard conversations bring clarity to the heart, to the mind, and to the soul. And the sister says, also, maybe the husband wanted more than one wife. He should have been open and honest with his wife instead of sneaking around. And this is a possibility as well. It's a possibility. Maybe he wanted more than one wife. But again, as Sister Nairi mentioned, that, you need to be honest. about that, not only during your marriage, but before getting married, right? Because that may be something that maybe the sister's not down with, right? And if she's not down with that, she may never be down with that. And if she's never going to be down with that, that will always cause a problem every time you bring it up. I know brothers who just can't get it out of their heads that their wife are not down with that type of a situation. And they'll bring it up and they'll bring it up and they'll bring it up and they'll bring it up. And the wife is like, no, no, no. It causes problems in the household and it just disrupts everything. And in many instances, it breaks apart something that may already be beautiful, inshallah ta'ala. And brothers, wallahi, having a second wife isn't all that it's made up to be. Okay, again, you've been watching maybe those Saudi videos or some YouTube stuff, about mashallah, the brother with the 4 wives and all his wives living together in the same house. Or you've been watching Sister Wives, right? With the people out of Utah. And you're watching Sister Wives, you're like, wow, look at this dude, mashallah, right? That should be us. Listen, man, watch Sister Wives really good and analyze really good. There's issues in the household all the time, right? It's not all it's made up to be, inshallah ta'ala, right? So, try to get one right? Try to get your first marriage right, man. Most of the times, brothers are thinking about a second marriage, don't have the first one right. Leave that stuff alone, inshallah ta'ala. Focus on your marriage, focus on your relationship, and more importantly, focus on Allah, right? Focus on Allah, right? Try to get that desire out of your head, right? Because this is a desire that runs you crazy, right? And we're not saying that it's not halal, right? Brothers don't jump on me. Oh, Imam, it's halal, blah, blah, blah. I know it's halal. I know Allah has ordained it. Allah has legislated. Allah has allowed it. But let's look at the reality of the times in which we live in, inshallah ta'ala, and how difficult these times are. And we're not living during the times of the Prophet ﷺ. And even then, when you analyze the relationships of the Prophet ﷺ and his wives, we find that there was difficulty. His wives also were jealous. His wives also weren't happy. Look at Aisha. She used to get upset by Khadija's name being mentioned all the time, right? This is a reality, right? This is a reality, inshallah ta'ala. And Allah ta'ala knows best. Another sister here in our WhatsApp group, she says, why is there a lack of support in the community for single moms or divorced women? Sister Saida, I'm not sure. That should not be the case. Unfortunately, we should be supporting our single women. We should be supporting our single moms. We should be trying to find these women meant to marry, inshallah ta'ala, right? Again, you're not broken. You're not, subhanAllah, damaged goods, inshallah ta'ala. You got married, you had a relationship, kids came out of that, it didn't work out. You both moved on your ways, inshallah ta'ala. It doesn't mean that now these are bad people, right? Sometimes very good people end up divorced, right? Just because the marriage wasn't meant to be between those two people. Not everybody is meant to be together, inshallah ta'ala, right? But you try your best to work it out and try your best to be with someone who you think you're going to be with long term, inshallah ta'ala. But we definitely, inshallah ta'ala, need to realize that we need to take care of these sisters, inshallah ta'ala, in our communities and need to make sure that they're okay, inshallah ta'ala, help them move on. I have a private message that was sent to me. How can you communicate with one that continues to lie or make excuses? It's difficult, right? Because if the person is just a liar and everything they do is lie and they don't have any fear of Allah, it becomes difficult. It becomes hard. My advice would be try therapy, try couples counseling, see what can come out of that. Find a Muslim who can do it, who's specialized. Don't go to the Imam. Wallahi, don't go to the Imam. I'm an Imam and I'm telling you, don't come to the Imams. Again, we're not qualified specialists for therapy and counseling. We didn't study this stuff. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, we may have read books on love and all of this other stuff, inshallah ta'ala. But at the end of the day, we're not qualified. It's not our specialty, inshallah ta'ala. Some imams may be able to help a little bit, inshallah ta'ala, but I believe in there being a synergy between the imam and between the therapist, inshallah ta'ala, for the good of the clients, right? Both the Muslim brothers and the Muslim sisters, inshallah ta'ala. So I think that, either the counseling and the therapy, you find a solution there in the counseling or the therapy, or even if the counseling and the therapy continues to go the same way things have been going with the lying, with the deceit, the failed communication, inshallah ta'ala, then, you have to reach a point where you may have to say to yourself, is it really worth continuing to stay in this marriage, right? If the person doesn't want to do any of that, if they don't want to do therapy, they don't want to do couples counseling, they don't want to do any of that, then perhaps that is a sign from them telling you that, this marriage is not worth it, right? Because we should be able to do whatever is necessary to make the marriage work, right? If our wife or if our husband is telling us we need help, we need counseling, we need therapy, we need this, we need that, I want us to do it together for the benefit of us, right? I'm not sitting here and just pointing fingers at you. I got problems too, right? And this is the best way to approach the situation. I got problems too. I want us to come and be able to solve our problems together, inshallah ta'ala. And if the person says no, then that may be a red flag, a sign that they're not going to change, they're not willing to change. And maybe it's time to walk away amicably, inshallah ta'ala, leave them in kindness or remain with them in kindness, right? And if you decide to remain in kindness, then being patient and asking Allah for help until the point where you feel that you can't take it anymore, inshallah ta'ala, and it's time for you to go, right? But again, if you decide to stay, then and that person doesn't decide to do counseling with you, I would still suggest you do counseling, right? Because you need to be able to deal with your emotional stress and whatever trauma you're facing, inshallah ta'ala. And then maybe all of that will help clarify as well where you need to go, inshallah ta'ala. And Allah ta'ala knows best, inshallah. Allah knows best, but may Allah make it easy for you, inshallah ta'ala. And then we pray that He gives you clarity of mind and clarity of direction, inshallah ta'ala, and that He answers your supplications and that He gives you what's best for you in this life and the next. I mean, another sister here, she says, I have divorced online for 4 years. I looked for love for 4 years and met bad people. I now take care of my daughter and leave my destiny to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes. And subhanAllah, sometimes that's just the case, right? The case may be that you end up divorced and you end up trying to remarry again, and it becomes very difficult. I know a couple of brothers in the same situations. They've been trying to get married for 5-6 years now, and they just haven't found the right woman. It's just been a lot of red flags that jump off, and subhanAllah, they're like, no, that's not the type of woman I want. And it becomes difficult, but don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. There's someone for everybody, inshallah ta'ala, and Allah will bring forth that right person. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you this time because He knows that you need this time for something, inshallah ta'ala. And Allah's wisdom is only known by Him, inshallah, but we accept this qadr Allahu wa ma shafa'ala. Allah decrees what He wills, and He does, what He wills when He wills, and we accept that, inshallah ta'ala. And when that right moment comes, then inshallah ta'ala, I'm pretty sure you'll be ready to embrace that moment, inshallah ta'ala, and move on. She also says, work things out as a couple without adding family and private affairs. Keep space between in-laws. Don't cheat. My best advice, put Allah first and know marriage is sacred and not dispensable. Great advice, mashallah. Definitely, work things out as a couple. Oftentimes, when you bring family and get family involved, not to say that family shouldn't be involved, right? If you have family that can be open-minded, right? Because a person that has to come and be open-minded when they're looking at the situation is someone who knows that they're judging this and they're doing it in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So it's not, this is my daughter, or this is my son, but at the end of the day, you are two people, right? You're sitting down and asking me for my help, and whether you're my daughter or you're my son, it doesn't make a difference. I'm going to tell you if you're wrong, you're wrong. Khalas, why? Because I love you and I want to steer you right and guide you right, inshallah ta'ala, okay? So again, if your family can be that way, then okay. If your family can't be that way, because we know some family comes in and they destroy marriages even further, but again, always get help. I think before the family members, always couples therapy, always counseling, inshallah ta'ala. This, inshallah ta'ala, will help you out. Definitely don't cheat, right? Because adultery is a major sin in Islam. Adultery is a major sin in Islam, worse than fornication, right? Why? Because adultery is something that those people know better, right? Even so that if a person was married and a person was unmarried, in Islamic law, if it was still to be carried out in a certain country, the unmarried person who's committing fornication, they only get, right, the smallest punishment, the lashes. The adulterer gets the greater punishment. And the people say, well, that's not just.
Well, in the eyes of Islamic law, it's just. Why? Because the person who's been married knows better. They've been married before. They know better. The other person hasn't been married. They probably don't know better. They should have known better, but they have more ignorance than the one who's married, inshallah, right? But don't cheat, don't cheat, don't cheat. And as the sister says, put Allah first in everything that you do. If Allah is not first in your life, I can tell you your life is not going to be okay. I don't care what it is for. Marriage, work, school, whatever it is, Allah has to be first. His messenger Muhammad second. And then everybody else, your wife and your children, third, your parents, and like that, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and down the line, inshallah. Allah has to be first. If you place Allah first, inshallah, I'm not saying everything is going to be okay, but inshallah, everything is going to be okay, inshallah. Why? Because you will be okay with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And she puts hearts around the ayat of Allah where Allah says, leave in kindness and don't and keep them in kindness, or leave in kindness, or release them in kindness. And this is to show that there is mercy at the end of the day between our spouses. These are Muslim brothers and sisters, right? These are people who we should want good for. Maybe you hurt me really bad. You could have hurt me really, really bad, right? You could have broke me down emotionally, spiritually, and the whole like mentally. But at the end of the day, you know what? Allah is just. I don't want anything bad for you. I hope Allah guides you, because I know if Allah doesn't guide you, then perhaps there are some very bad things that are down the road for you. You know what I mean? And this is part of being a person who's going to take the higher road. And I know it's not easy, inshallah ta'ala, to take the higher road, but the higher road is always best. With that, brothers and sisters, I don't see anybody else. I'm not sure if anybody wants to unmic themselves. I'll give another second really quick to see if any other comments come in, statements, or the likes. Okay. I don't see anything else. Inshallah ta'ala, for those who came in late, for those who may have missed this, inshallah ta'ala, it'll be on our Mass New York Facebook page. It'll be on my personal Facebook page. It will be on our Mass New York YouTube page for anyone looking for our previous two sessions, marriage course number 1 and marriage course number 2. Those are on our Mass New York Facebook page as well. The entire course, the first one was 10 classes. The second one was 9, inshallah ta'ala. The first one was more about the concepts of setting up for marriage, right? The wali, the marriage, the proposal, all of these different things, finding the right partner. The second was the prophet at home, the wives with the prophet, love languages, how to communicate, right? And now the third is analyzing failed marriages and how do we get past some of these different things, inshallah ta'ala, that we are seeing and facing in our own marriages. And Allah ta'ala knows best, inshallah ta'ala. Again, if you need to reach us, inshallah ta'ala, privately, Wednesdays today, right? Wednesdays from 5 to 7. We have our hotline that I take private calls, inshallah ta'ala, 1-833-33 Mass New York, 1-833-33 Mass New York. And I believe my extension is 813, inshallah ta'ala. You're quite welcome, Sister Jen. You're quite welcome. And inshallah ta'ala, that rings to my phone from 5 to 7 on Wednesdays only. Any other time, it is going to take you to an answering machine. The answering machine will send me a message via email, inshallah ta'ala, and then you can just leave a message and I'll get back to you at my earliest convenience, inshallah ta'ala, and we can talk and dialogue at that point with whatever it is that you need. If it's just general, you can also reach us at revertsreconnect@massnewyork.org, revertsreconnect@massnewyork.org. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. We look forward to having you with us tomorrow. We have our Women Around the Messenger book club happening tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. It will be our third session every morning. You're also welcome to join us from 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning using the same link on Zoom only for the morning Quran reading in the English language, where we read the Quran together for a half hour every single day. Alhamdulillah, our group is now reading the Quran for their 5th time, inshallah ta'ala, this year. And we welcome every one of you to come out and take that journey and build and have that relationship with Allah and His book every single day with us, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah bless you all. I love you all for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah always love you, keep you firm in your faith. May He make you from those who put Him first, not last, put Him first, not second, put Him first all of the time. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always help you to steer your life in the right direction, and that direction always leads to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, to His mercy, to His pleasure, to His love, to His forgiveness, and to entrance into His paradise. Ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan, inshallah ta'ala. Wa iyak, Sister Layla. Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all, and please keep me and my family in your du'as, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.